Chapter 11, American Capitalism and Progressivism. Part 2, The Rapid Growth of American Material Power. America as a brash, young industrial giant. As powerful as the financial industrial giants Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Morgan, and Rockefeller were, they were not the only thing powering America. There was a sense of dynamic infecting the entire country, born of the various obvious changes in the national foundation, material foundation of American society. America was quite obviously joining the ranks of the great powers of the world. You didn't even need to be told this. The feeling was just there. But there was indeed a factual basis for this feeling. By the time just prior to the outbreak of the Great War, that is World War I, in 1914, America alone was responsible for 1/3 of the world's total industrial production, more than Britain, France, and Germany combined. That figure alone spoke volumes about what America was becoming. After all, there was evidence everywhere you looked. Yet, as the 1800s came to a close, it was generally considered by those outside America to be the age of Europe, with European empires stretching around the world, bringing British and Dutch business practices to Asia, French culture to virtually all parts of the world, the division of the African continent into spheres of English, French, German, and Belgian political cultural control. Islamic culture was in a mood to copy European ways, as was the Japanese culture as well. Europe understood itself to be the world's arbiter in the matter of what was good, what was worthy, and what was not. It is not that America went unnoticed, but it was viewed by upper-class Europeans as a primitive land of Indians and cowboys, and by working-class Europeans as a place to escape to in order to find work, any kind of work. None of this presented a picture of sophistication or anything worthy of social attention. Yet the fact was that America had just reached the status of being an industrial giant, the largest in the world, at about the time that Europe had reached the peak of its glory. And what Europe did not understand was that the next century, the 20th, would be a time of decline for itself, and also be a time when America would finally register itself internationally as the world's greatest power. The basic material components of American power. The railroad industry. As we've already seen, railroads were encouraged to reach west across empty plains, deserts, and high mountains by governmental financial incentives. But overall, and even more importantly, as more railroads spread elsewhere and everywhere across the nation, it was the huge private, that is non-governmental, financial trusts that were able to amass the capital necessary to finance this massive construction of rail lines. These vital rail lines spanned the nation from ocean to ocean, from Canada to Mexico, carrying a massive amount of goods needed to fuel the huge national economy. Food and raw materials headed east, finished goods headed west. Built on farming, mining, manufacture, and they carried a restless population, always looking for new horizons and new opportunities in this vast nation. The telegraph and the telephone. Keeping the country linked together was also the telegraph, which followed the railroad lines so that a flow of vital information kept up with a huge flow of goods and people across the nation. Never before had such a huge territory had such instant linkage, so that these massive distances from ocean to ocean found themselves melted down to the level of human horizon that only a couple of generations previously would have reached out only 10 or so miles, the distance that is from the farm to the local town nearby. Distance seemed virtually to have been annihilated. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell patented the phone and formed the company of his name, taking phone service in 1877 from 3,000 users to 260,000 users by 1893, when his patent ended his exclusive right to operate a phone service. Then thousands of independent companies jumped into the market, and soon even poorer Americans could afford the luxury of a phone. By 1920, 13 million phones were providing service to over a third of the American households, rural as well as urban. The American iron and steel industry. Of course, the railroad steam engines and the vast use of iron rails called forth a massive iron industry, and from that eventually the more expensive but more sophisticated steel industry. Soon steel would be a key part of America's industrial success. From 1870 to just before World War I, America's annual growth rate in steel production averaged 7%, thanks in great part to Carnegie, whereas Britain's was a mere 1%. Germany's was 6%, France, Belgium, and Russia, the other major steel producers, was a little over 4%. Overall, American annual steel production climbed from 380,000 tons in 1875 to 60 million tons in 1920. The oil industry. We've already seen that the oil industry got off to a huge start when it was discovered how to replace expensive whale oil with kerosene refined from the crude oil seemingly abundant in Pennsylvania. The age of the machine also required oil as a lubricant. Then, with the development of the internal combustion engine fired by gasoline or diesel fuel, the demand would grow even stronger for oil's distillate, gasoline. Gas and electric lighting. Gas lighting, distilled from coal, was already in wide use in England in the early 1800s, lighting streets, making them safer at night. Factories, 24-hour work was now possible. Theaters, much brighter than candles, and even homes, of the wealthy, of course. America quickly caught on to the possibilities, and Baltimore, 1817, was quick to adopt the use of gas for lighting. By the mid-1800s, gas lighting and the lamplighter, who moved from lamp to light them at night, was a regular feature of America's major cities. But gas had one major disadvantage. It was dangerous. Theaters burned down when something went wrong with the gas distribution or lamp system. Homes could also suffer the same catastrophe. This then led by the 1870s to electric lighting in theaters, but also in city streets and businesses, using the electric arc system that produced very bright light, used also in coastal searchlights. Helping to develop this technology into a massive business venture was the amazingly versatile inventor Thomas Edison. He held over 1,000 patents. Thomas Alva Edison. Edison grew up in Michigan selling newspapers and candy on trains, but also conducting chemical experiments aboard, which eventually got him in trouble. He turned to printing his own paper, the beginning of his very successful business career. He became a telegraph operator and then newswire operator for the Associated Press. Meanwhile, he engaged himself on the side in experimenting with electricity, batters, and transmission lines. Moving as an impoverished young man to a friend's house in New Jersey, he there developed the stock ticker and then patented, his first at age 22, the electronic vote counter. Although being hard of hearing, he went on to develop the first phonograph, 1877, age 30, on tinfoil wrapped around a cylinder, being invited to Washington to demonstrate his invention before U.S. President Hayes and the Congress. He was now a celebrity inventor. He moved on to develop his own research lab, which eventually expanded to 2 city blocks, financed initially from a sophisticated telegraph bought from him by Western Union. Here, with the help of his hired assistants, he went about the business methodically of conducting experiments involving a wide array of instruments and machines, and ultimately the incandescent light bulb. He began experimentation on such a light in 1878. The next year ran a successful test on a low voltage, thus inexpensive, carbon filament light that lasted for over 13 hours. With some more improvements, he was able to patent the year after that, 1880, a very durable light using a bamboo filament that could burn for over 1,200 hours. He was tireless in his pursuit of invention, commenting at one point, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." He had an excellent eye for the business aspect of his inventions, and while still conducting his lighting experiments, in order to manufacture and market his lights, he set up the Edison Electric Light Company in New York City in 1878, including J.P. Morgan and some of the Vanderbilts as investors. From this venture, he went on, 1880, to form the electricity utility, Edison Illuminating Company, to distribute electricity to New York City using a 110-volt generating system, establishing that as the American standard, whereas a 220-volt system is used in Europe. Then he ran into trouble with his direct current, or DC system, when George Westinghouse began to compete with an alternating current, or AC, system that distributed electric power much more widely and cheaply than Edison's DC system. A corporate battle thus erupted between the two men, one that Edison was not destined to win. By 1890, he was forced out of his own company by J.P. Morgan, and the company merged with an AC company to become General Electric, a huge AC company which then controlled almost 3/4 of the electric businesses, Westinghouse being the largest holder of the other quarter of the business. Edison went on to develop motion pictures, his first invention in 1891 being a kinetoscope, or peephole viewer. Then in 1896 he invented a movie projector, able to cast a film image on a screen in front of a full audience. He even invented a recording machine able to synchronize the sound with the film. His movie projector proved to be a grand success, his film studio making them almost 1,200 short films, and prospering Edison greatly. He was active in other fields as well, the rubber industry, mining, X-ray, which he learned the hard way was very dangerous because of its radiation. And besides his activity in New Jersey, he had a house built in Fort Myers, Florida, next door to a man who had once worked for his lighting company, and who he took to liking to in encouraging his own development, Henry Ford. The two would remain close friends until Edison's death in 1931.